right, welcome everyone to Mostly Star Wars podcast. This week, as you know by our title, we're going to be talking about the Rise of Skywalker. But first, I want to introduce our hosts. We have Josiah here,
Hello there.
and we have Quinton, who doesn't get to say hello there.
How's it going?
All right. Well, I also just want to mention for those that might be listening for the first time on our podcast later, we do these shows live if you want on YouTube. If you want to join in the discussion with us, you can always do that on the YouTube. Well, okay, so before we get into, I was telling the guys, before we get into the movie discussion, I kind of wanted to say something about the sequels themselves, and I got thinking after my rewatch yesterday of just how much I love this movie. But it made me stop and think because watching it, I enjoy it so much. I see the flaws, but there are the flaws that the internet points out. And yes, these movies aren't perfect, but Star Wars is never perfect. The prequels aren't perfect. Everyone jokes about the sand, but we love them. And we can love these movies too. We don't have to let silly lines like somehow Palpatine returned ruin the fun of these movies. It's okay to love these movies. These are Star Wars, and I firmly believe that in the next 10 years, the flaws in these movies will be mostly forgotten, just like the prequels. And what you have left is great Star Wars. And that's kind of just what I wanted to say off the top, and then I'll let you guys kind of go from where you want to go there, Josiah or Quinton.
Quinton?
I don't know. I do think this movie starts off pretty good with that scene with Kylo and the Knights of Ren just wrecking people. The music
That is
pretty good.
The Mustafar
Yeah.
scene there is pretty cool.
Yeah. I think like when I think of this movie, I feel similar to kind of like what you were saying, Tyler. I feel like I may have been tainted a little bit on the sequel trilogy by the time I got to this movie a little bit. And, immediately after leaving the theater, there was already, like you were saying, people, picking it apart and nitpicking. And so I will agree that, I guess got tainted a little bit by the negativity just surrounding the sequels in general. But there is, I feel like in this movie, a lot more good to me personally because I got past a lot of the things that I disliked in the first two movies, and I could focus on where they went, where they ended up in the story wise. And I think this one, it was really good as far as where they ended up taking these characters from where they started. So I do like that. And like you were saying, I think, well, really from the crawl, one thing that I was excited to see is it says Kylo Ren is now the supreme leader, right? So that was exciting to kind of see. I mean, it was kind of, clear that was I guess the path that was going to happen from the last movie, but it was kind of cool to see that take form in live action. I would say that uh, it would have been nice to see Kylo be more supreme leader, ruler-y, and see him on the throne and tell the Knights of Ren to go massacre a bunch of things, or be like a Vader situation where he has like a whole army go and decimate everything, and then he just like walks through all the carnage type thing, like he's the ruler. I mean, I think that would have been cool too to see, and I think, like this one, it kind of focused more specifically on him fighting and stuff like that. I would have liked to see that Kylo Ren in the first two movies, him just like massacring people on behalf of Snoke. but then this one him more be like Snoke and be like taking charge, the leader, and ruling the Knights of Ren like he should be.
I kind of feel like this movie, uh, it's different for Kylo because he's no longer under Snoke and he has to listen to Snoke. It almost seems more like to me that his attitude is, I'm the boss now. You guys do this, take care of this. I'm gonna go do whatever I want. And so I'm gonna do what I want. No one's telling me what to do anymore. I'm gonna take care of the business I want to take care of. And I think that's what draws Kylo the most is his connection with Rey.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And Vader was the same way. Vader,
But Vader
he
always had a
did
leash.
he did well, yeah, but also did his own thing a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so I think there's similarities there as far as like they had something that they wanted to do and they basically just went for it. And that's what I mean. The difference is Vader did what he wanted to do, but he also, had people do a lot of the stuff that he wanted to do for him. So I think that would be just the only thing I would have liked to see him like tell the Knights of Ren, not even specifically about getting the Wayfinder at the beginning, but really anything like, hey, you need to go do XYZ. And they're like, yes, Supreme Leader, and go and just massacre.
Yeah. I also like the, especially at the beginning here, we're talking about the music as he's flying to Exegol is phenomenal. I think it's some of the best John Williams, and that's saying a lot. It kind of almost gives you chills. And I find it interesting because at the end, when Rey is making that same journey, you hear the same music going through there. And so it's really, really good stuff. And I'm almost disappointed that theme is like super short. I wanted to get more of that theme. But I also, so when Kylo gets to Exegol, he goes down and he's hearing all the voices of Palpatine, Snoke, Vader, and he's like, I'm just gonna go kill Palpatine. And Palpatine's like, dude, I've been in your head this whole time. You don't even know. And
yeah,
I like the thing that he tries to tempt Kylo by saying he'll give him everything, that he'll be the emperor of a new empire. And like, okay, who believes that? Because Palpatine's never going to give up power. But just the way he says everything. And it's like, that's the pull of the dark side. That is greed in its purest form, just like wanting everything. And that's what Kylo wants, and that's the greed of the dark side. And so yeah, I find it interesting that he's trying to tempt Kylo. And Rebellica just said, Palpatine said it himself, all who gain power are afraid to lose it. Yeah, in its most truest form, he's the most afraid to lose his power.
Yeah, I do think, though, whether it is with Kylo or whether it is with Rey, I do feel like he would have been 100% fine with them, fighting to the death to see, who's stronger. And then I do feel like when he was talking to Rey about her being the Empress, right? I do feel like he was being honest to some extent because, just like Palpatine was he was the apprentice, but he was the face, the public face of the Sith, and he was the ruler. He was the chancellor. He became the emperor, and his master was totally fine with that, being behind the scenes pulling the strings. So I do feel like he probably would have been okay with Rey, being the empress face of the Sith, but he's still in the background pulling the strings.
Mm-hmm. And as we're kind of gonna, just so everyone knows, we're kind of gonna move a little bit quickly because some of us have things that came up that they have to take care of after the stream here. So we're gonna move more quickly than usual. I like his name is Bilio or Bolio, the alien at the front that they're meeting. That's the spy. That's giving them the message about the spy in the First Order. That's relaying them. I always
Yeah.
love that. I always like that line is so epic. How can we ever repay you? Win the war. I just
Poor guy.
love that. Also, did you know that's Mark Hamill?
Yeah. It was
Yeah.
short-lived, but he had a
I
good.
like Mark Hamill. It's so funny because he has even come out and said it. He's basically had a cameo of some kind or another under secret names in every Star Wars project since Disney's been making them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of funny. I
I
kind of
guess it
wonder
goes to
is
show you,
he becoming?
even if he's unhappy with the way his character was portrayed, he still loves the saga.
I think I kind of wonder if they're gonna start making him like Stan Lee for the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
But his are but Mark Hamill's are always secret. And
Mhm.
he's even revealed that he has a name in the credits of what his secret alias is. I can't remember what it was, but you look like you got something to add there, Q.
No, you're good.
Okay, so next we get Rey is trying to reach the Jedi of old, and that she's training, which I think that was one of the biggest complaints that everyone
Yes.
had
Mhm.
with the first two, and so you can obviously tell that they made sure to put this in. And I know we talked a lot about the problems that this movie has, but for the most part, I don't even really see a lot, especially like that kind of stuff. I don't really see it as much when you sit down and watch it and just enjoy it.
Yeah,
And
I totally agree with you on that. And I will mention this. Um, it's kind of hard for me to audibly say this, but I will admit, like, this movie, the last two times that I watched it in preparation for this show, like, I really enjoyed it. I I I tried to clear my head, be 100% in the movie like I always do, and, like, I truly was. Like, there was moments in it that I felt were so amazing, and as anybody knows, you watch any type of film, and you get goosebumps. You start feeling what the characters are feeling. I feel like that is an amazing
Mhm.
movie, and this movie gave that to me. It gave it to me once again, and I was even shocked myself, like, wow, like that actually just hit me. Like what just happened there actually affected me. And on top of it, I've seen it
Mhm.
multiple times. So I do think that this movie of the three, when I can put aside, my flaws of the whole sequel trilogy itself, I think this movie did a great job at a lot of different things. I think they gave respect and paid homage to the characters that I felt, got the short end of the stick. They gave Han his homage, his respect, which was amazing. They did the same thing for Leia, obviously, and then they did the same thing for Chewie. Chewie got his medal, and like he was part of the joy and the celebration. And you were kind of talking about all of the different cameos, and once again we get Warwick Davis. So
Mhm.
me, that's a personal favorite of mine. We got to see Wicket, and like I've said before, his character arc continued on. He didn't just become clumsy and die or something like that. He has his own son. So that was cool to see, like, him and his little son at the end, and once again, kind of like moving, bringing forward that little thing, because Warwick Davis has a ton of cameos too in like
Mm-hmm.
every Star Wars movie, and he just loves Star Wars so much.
Yeah, he
And
does, because he's
so
always at the celebrations, everything.
yes. And so yeah, I love seeing him in there. And then so it's Wicket and his son, but it's really Warwick Davis and his real life son together at the end of the movie. And that just, it touches me, like taking everything out of it. I'm a dad. So that was really huge to get to see him take his son now into Star Wars and continue on the legacy.
I, uh, yeah, I agree. There's a lot of moments when you watch this movie, even the stuff that people will complain about that say, uh, are contradictory to The Last Jedi. I don't believe that. A lot of people complain about when Luke catches the lightsaber and then says a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect. And people are like, JJ is telling Ryan that he's wrong. And I'm like, yeah, again, you didn't pay attention to the end of The Last Jedi. Ryan Johnson already said that. We've moved on. This Luke learned that lesson in The Last Jedi, and so this is just him reinforcing that lesson on Rey. And this time I was watching that moment, and you just get chills, and it's so good. Everything
Mhm.
falls in place, and it doesn't feel out of place. It doesn't feel like one filmmaker is trying to tell another filmmaker that they're wrong about how they view Star Wars. It just feels like Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think once again, like I was saying, the respect and the homage, they did the same thing with Luke, and you basically touched on exactly what I wanted to say about that. Is so not only was that epic, like you said, like him catching that lightsaber, because we know he wanted to catch the lightsaber out of the snow instead of Rey. uh, before, he said that multiple times. But so him being able to catch that in the flames, that was awesome. And then I love when he's just like, "What are you doing?" Kind of like, "Are you serious? This is what you're gonna be, how you're gonna act." And then when she says, "I was trying to be like you, I'm doing the same thing you did," and he says, "I was wrong," and exactly going to your
Mm-hmm.
point. So it's like it took what they did throughout that movie up until the very end, and brought it back to the Luke Skywalker that I believe in, and he now not only, if I can, take that away, all of those years of what he did and just see him as, he made a mistake, he admitted that he's wrong, and now he's helping teach based on his failure to the new generation. That was a really cool thing what they ended up doing for Luke.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. I really like Luke's portrayal here. I like even the little things that they do in this movie. It's kind of funny if you notice it. They never ever show his right hand.
Hmm.
It's like hidden in his robe or something. And when he's lifting the X-wing, it's always his left hand
Hmm.
that's out. And I because you know that his right hand was the one that was cut off, so it would have had a metal hand. And I like how they just address that without actually doing anything. They just don't show the hand.
Huh.
Like just the little things like that. I
Yeah,
love.
I never noticed that.
And but so I kind of want to get, because one of my favorite scenes in the movie is, well, one, okay, before we get there, let's talk. They go to Pisana. Oh, okay. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. So Rebellica said it was hard to watch this movie without Carrie Fisher. And I will say that while I wish that she could have been able to finish the story, what they were able to do with her was fantastic. And the way
Mhm.
her story finishes is beautiful. even if maybe some
Mhm.
of her lines aren't perfect and you can tell that they were meant for different scenarios
Yeah.
somewhat, if you just buy into the movie and what's going on, the way they did it, it's beautiful. And her story in this movie, her connection with Ben is is fantastic.
Hmm.
Yeah, I felt they really did a respectable job in her involvement in this film, and I think as fans, we were glad that we got to see some more of her.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think, a lot of people have, film creators, movie studios have had to deal with situations like this. And I feel like it's a lot of times like a lose-lose, because, when someone passes away in real life, especially a beloved, character in the story and a beloved, human being, I think no one's ever gonna 100% be happy with what you do, whether you don't put them at all, whether you put some or whether you put a lot of them. I think that's a lot of times the issues that you run into. And I think like what you guys were saying, I think they did a really good job in there. I don't think there was any scenes where I was like, that was pushing it, or why, that was forcing it, or why did they do so much? Like I felt like everything made sense. It felt good. And it was kind of like it was a farewell movie to her that, you know, whether, she died in real life or not, I think that it was a beautiful movie to the character. And so I think that, she would have, if she were able to watch this movie in its entirety, I think that she would be proud of what they did with her character.
Yeah, it definitely fit. Her story here does not contradict anything that Leia ever did. It fits exactly with who that character was throughout her life.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And it is like that is I talk about the moments this movie can bring, kind of like you were saying, is that moment when she passes and she calls to Ben. It's one of the saddest moments in all of Star Wars. It's like it's hard not to get teary eyed,
Yeah.
especially when they come back and they tell. I think it's interesting the way they do that scene, because when they first focus on Finn, and Finn first focuses on Poe when they're told that Leia's gone, but then they realize that no, it's not going to be nearly as hard for us as Chewie, and that's when Chewie
Yeah.
breaks down, and that's one of the hardest but most beautiful scenes I think in all of Star Wars.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And big shout outs real quick to the chat. We got Bruce in the chat. Appreciate you. And Blind Giant 808 as well. Thanks both of you guys for jumping in as well. Always love seeing everybody in the chat. Rebecca, always.
Um, and so just I will kind of get more into it in a little bit. So I kind of want to go a little bit back. One, Lando's introduction was
Hmm.
fantastic,
Yeah.
and it just I really like the part when he takes off his helmet and he realizes, or and everyone realizes who it is, and I do feel like this was JJ kind of fixing his own mistake,
Hmm.
because the first thing Chewie sees him and he's gotta go give him a hug.
Hmm.
And I feel like that was JJ trying to fix his own mistake of not having Leia hug Chewie at the end of Force Awakens. I felt like that's kind of and but it was so good to see. And I love uh they go, how did you find us? Wookiee stand out in a crowd.
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
yeah, just all of it. It was so great. And once again, not to beat a dead horse, but I love what they did with that character. Once again, we've talked about it before. We talked about it when we covered Solo, but all of these beloved characters, I feel like they can bring them back and let them pass down their legacy, their knowledge, their wisdom to the next generation, right? They can pass that down without them having to, revert in their character arcs. They don't have to be losers. He continues to be like his suave swagger, and all the way through this movie up until the very end, he has like a really cool, calm, like demeanor, but also, talks with the confidence, that, he has the backing financially to back whatever he says he's going to do.
So, and then after that scene, you get the. I know Quinton wants to mention the tracks and the chase scene there.
Yeah, I mean, it felt a little weird that the First Order being more advanced than the Empire, their speeders rely on ground transportation. They're not actually speeders.
Okay, what are walkers?
Oh,
What are AT-ATs?
those are heavy transports for carrying stuff, carrying troopers and supplies.
That
and
was
stuff.
a Star Destroyer. It still floats.
Speeders are supposed to be fast, man. It's just weird,
What about they fly now?
I know that's one that bugs you.
Oh man.
I just think it's I love C3PO in this scene too, because he's like, it looks like you lost him. Wonderful job, sir. And then, oh, they're back. Terrible job, sir. I think
still being a butler.
That's what I was gonna say on this movie too. So on top of a big welcome to Seth, love always seeing you in the chat. But yeah, so the other thing is this movie, like I literally laughed out loud at different moments, and like I didn't get that watching the first two. There's some funny moments, but I definitely didn't laugh out loud. And I think they do the humor in this one so good. Like, I don't know. There's just different.
Yes, I agree.
There's different moments in here that I was just like, that's just so good. Even at the beginning when they all look at 3PO, right? And then he's like,
and he looks behind him.
Oh man, it gets me every single time. I don't know. There's just a few different good moments in this movie that I was like, okay, like, that's good humor.
Yeah. Just like the Seth said, Babu Frick is the greatest. He is. Awesome.
I love that character. He's so good.
I just like even the stuff he normally says. Droid mind go blank. Blank blank.
Blank blank blank. Oh man.
Yeah. I love when
characters.
I love when Babu Frick right after C3PO has his memory wipe and he introduces himself and he goes, "I'm Babu Frick." And then later when they say they intercepted a message, C3PO goes, "Oh, Babu Frick, he's one of my oldest friends."
Yeah.
Even though he's known for like half a day.
Yeah.
And he was the first one to introduce himself to him.
Yeah, 100%. I love also that when C3PO, whatever, they break the firewall or whatever you want to say, and has him do the translation that his eyes turn red. Like it was such like and I think like my viewpoint of it's changed like kind of over time as well on that. But I really like that they do that. Symbolism is so huge. This one like smacks you right in the face, but I really do like that they did that because it reminds me now after the Obi-Wan Kenobi series of Lola. Right?
Yes.
It's the same thing, like the lights just red is bad. Anywhere in droids, sabers, doesn't matter what it is. And that was another really just the humor in the whole thing, that he knew what it says but he couldn't say, and so I thought that was a really good ploy. Who knows who the specific person said that you can't translate Sith was, but like I do think that that's that kind of story arc within this movie, and the way that they played it off and the way C3PO was about it, was really good. I think they played that off good.
Okay, so there's like two things I want to mention. So before we get to the Babu Frick there is the scene with Rey and Kylo and the TIE fighter in the desert. I think that scene is incredible.
Yeah.
The just the whole thing. I love Kylo's TIE fighter. I think that is one of the coolest ships in all of Star Wars.
Yeah.
I've looked. I really, really want a Lego of that.
Yeah, for sure.
I've looked, and the only one I can find is the one, because it's slightly different from the one from The Last Jedi, because it has the classic ball in the middle, but it has the silencer types on the side. I really like that, and so that scene is amazing. And then I kind of wanted to touch on kind of what we were talking about with C3PO, and I feel like everyone says, well, they played it up like 3PO is gonna die. Well, they actually said, doesn't R2 back up your memory? Like, and he says, C3PO says he's all reliable, or he's not very reliable. But of course he's gonna say,
he says R2 units are historically storage is unreliable. Not necessarily R2D2, but R2 units in general.
Yeah, but he always makes funny comments like that about R2. That's their friendship, basically. And so, but I like that moment when he turns back to look at him, and he's like, and then like, what's going on, 3PO? And he's like, I'm just taking one last look at all my friends. And I like that he's looking at them, so you feel like he's talking about them. But I also get by his words that he's scouring his memory banks. He's looking at Obi-Wan. He's looking at Luke. He's looking at Leia and everyone that he's ever met and his entire life. And it kind of is like not just at the three of them. And it kind of is just like it does kind of get that ball in your throat, and you're like, God, it just makes you love Star Wars.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that moment is really big in this movie. Hits you big time. Anybody who loves Star Wars, you gotta love the droids, right? And they become like just like any other character, and that was so huge. I remember that moment in the theater the very first time, and yeah, that just wrecks you. That totally gets you. When you don't know what's going to end up happening, right? And so I think that one is really big. And I think the other thing you mentioned was Kylo in the sand playing chicken with Rey, basically. And that was one of the moments that, because it wasn't just that though, it was everything that I knew coming up, right? But I feel like that whole scene from her taking down his ship in like an actually super cool way, and then all the way to the transport, when Force Lightning comes out for the first time, that whole scene right there just gave me the chills, because as I talked about before, like I love like Force abilities, but my issue is when people have Force abilities that just never learned how to do them. But this one, why everything makes sense, and I'm 100% okay with anything. Rey could have done anything in this movie, and I would have been okay with it. Why? Because we specifically saw her get trained by Leia. Not only did we hear about it, but we physically watched her in this movie training with Leia. So now anything she does is explained. It's easily explained. She does that cool backflip, take down a ship. Hey, she could have learned that while she was training with Leia. She holds that shuttle or whatever that's more than she's ever done before. Well, she's been training how to use the Force and realizing that size matters not, right?
And
all of these things are now explained because we saw her train, and we know that she trained with Leia. So, all of this, like, I feel like all of my issues with like, things that she knew how to do or could do maybe before, I thought she should have been able to. That's all blown out the window now. Now she's full bore. She's trained to be a Jedi, and with one of the the greatest Jedis ever, Leia. So
I know a lot of people complain about, like, say, the Force healing and stuff. And you know how we've kind of talked about how the Jedi diluted their power in the prequels, basically. If you talk about, say, the light side is 100% and the dark side is 100%, well, when you divide 100% into 10,000 people, it's very diluted. Whereas when you have Rey here, we're basically currently alive. She's pretty much the only light user, so she could be drawing upon all of that. And so I love, because you kind of mentioned it. You see her training. We see her when you first see her training. She's floating there, way up in the air, and so you could easily see how she could make that jump.
Yeah, and then like when she's done, she does like a cool little fancy backflip to land.
Yeah,
It's like, like she's legit now. I mean, we've already talked about this before, but the span's only like what, like, under 2 years. So it's like a year, but depending how you want to say the months and everything of the whole trilogy, it isn't that long, but this is understandable now. It's like, it's okay to say like she was training, but she's a really fast learner. So she learned all this stuff, but at least we know she's training.
And we learn why she is so strong.
Yeah.
And so, because, I mean, it's in just her blood. And I kind of like, we'll kind of move on past the Babu Frick stuff. And I think it was interesting kind of to note, because Zori tells Poe that the First Order came and collected all the children. And obviously to enslave them into stormtroopers.
Yeah.
But so we get to, I think it's a different moon on Endor is what they say. Said it's a different moon of Endor. Because they don't call it the Forest Moon. They just say moon of Endor, or in the Endor system, something like that. Which makes sense, and I'm perfectly fine with. And so Rey gets the Wayfinder, has her little fight with herself, because obviously that place is powerful with the dark side. And then she gets the Wayfinder, and it rolls right to Kylo, and he destroys it. I personally love this saber battle. I think there's a lot of emotions going on in it. I like the fact that, as powerful as we just talked about Rey is, like when the one time Rey jumps out of the way of the waves, and Kylo jumps over her and past her, so he's making a further jump. So you're seeing how much he's gained as well.
Yeah.
And then I also like another time where she also tries to jump out of the waves again, and he's just like, "I'm so strong, I'm not moving." He walks through it, and he comes out soaking wet.
And
I
the
feel
ladies like that too.
I feel like this battle, as far as the saber work goes, left a little to be desired. But I did think there were some excellent examples of them using the Force, like Rey pushing back Finn so he doesn't follow her, and the epic Force jumps.
And they also do the things that the Force block with the saber. They block the sabers with the Force a couple times. And I liked, but what was interesting to me is Kylo wins this fight. She's beaten. He's just doing hard lunges on her, and she's basically on her hands and knees. She's beaten.
It sounds like an exercise, hard lunges.
Well, no, but he's striking at her with a lot of strength.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to me that, and this is kind of like one of my favorite parts, and and why I said the Leia story is so beautiful, because he beat Rey,
Mm-hmm.
but Leia calls out to him,
Yeah.
and I felt like, because he said right before they start, you can never, you just like me, you can never go back to her.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment, it felt like Leia was calling to Ben saying, no, it's okay, you can. It's okay, we still love you. We're still
Mm-hmm.
your mom and dad, we still love you. And he could feel her dying, and he dropped his lightsaber, and that's where Rey kind of acts rashly
Yeah.
and stabs him.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that like this kind of moment is almost Rey's moment from Return of the Jedi, where Luke cuts off Vader's hand.
Yeah. Yep.
She kind of like realizes, okay, what I just did, and so she has the line. She heals him and then says that she did want to take his hand. She wanted to take Ben's hand.
Mm-hmm.
And then I find it interesting that she then runs off to Octu to do what Luke did. But I love, right there you get Maz Kanata saying, goodbye, dear princess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's touching, but you get, I kind of want to talk about Kylo's, or Ben at this point, his memory of Han.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost, for the most part, it's almost the same words that are when they're on the bridge in The Force Awakens.
Mm-hmm.
Only a few lines are changed, and basically he's like, Kylo or Ben is like, well, I said I couldn't go back to her, and now she's gone, but she said I could come back. And Han goes, she might be gone, but what she fought for is not gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the moment when Ben is like, he can't say, he goes, Dad, and he can't say I love you, and Han
Mm-hmm.
just says, I know. That, as a
Yeah.
Star Wars fan,
Mm-hmm.
that's just a chilling
Yep.
moment, and it's so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love like the whole crescendo up to that moment. So you kind of touched on it, but I really like this battle. I like the fighting. It's understandable where they're at. Like you're saying, the very beginning of the movie, we have Kylo taking out like a whole village of monks or whatever they are, protecting the Wayfinder, right? So he takes all them out in, very up close and personal, passionate way, but you can see, like you're saying it. I think that kind of helped you see that, hopefully he worked on his lightsaber skills, but then we have Rey as well. So not only that, but what they're both fighting for are very different, but at the same time, really close to the same thing. And then you just have, basically Ray make that huge mistake, but then, kind of immediately,
Wait, are you saying she's
but
not perfect?
finally not. But I think the perfect thing about her is she made the mistake and then found the ability to heal him. But anyways, so that was all really crazy, right? And then the next time that you see him, he has this moment, with himself. Really, like it said, the memory of him, the memory of Han, and I think the cool thing about that is whether or not you know you want to view Han as whatever he ended up being before he died. I think the cool thing about this is how Ben remembers his dad. And I thought
Yes.
that was awesome because it's the same way I remember him.
He remembers in the last moments of his life, that he was there for his son,
Mhm. Right.
regardless of what happened before.
Yeah, and so I think that was that was awesome to see because obviously everybody freaked out about Han in the theater when we got to
Yes.
see him in this movie. Whether it's because of people are like, he's never going to do it because it's too much money and all this type of stuff, whatever it was before it came out. But the fact that when you saw him, you're like, what? That was just super. That was so awesome to see. I remember that moment like super vividly the first time I saw that. But yeah, that was super emotional, especially after everything that we just saw. I think that was an awesome moment in the movie, a huge turn that kind of changes the pace and the direction of the rest of the movie.
So then Finn and Poe go back to I don't know what the planet is that their base is on, but they go back to that planet and they all find out Leia's done, and we kind of discussed that. And but Poe is sitting there in front of Leia and going, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. I'm not ready. And I love Lando comes in and says, neither were we. Who's ever ready?
Yeah.
And
yeah, that line, it just makes you think of the original trilogy and just how young they were and how much they were able to accomplish when they might not have felt like they were strong enough to do anything.
And Poe goes, how did you take down an empire with just that and everything? And that's when Lando's like, who's ever ready? We had each other. That's how we won.
Yeah.
And I like this is another one. So Poe realizes what he's gonna do. I love how Poe's two mentors to become a leader are Leia and Lando. And he goes to Finn and he says, I need you in command with me. And then they do the general. I like that. That's always fun.
And then we also had Dio rummaging through Leia's stuff.
Yeah. Dio was interesting, and it kind of goes on your point about the droids in Star Wars and how I view them as basically like our pets. They're part of your family, and that's one interesting aspect, especially with Dio, because you can see that he was abused, and that's why Rey was like, okay, well, that's okay. You're with us now. And I
look, when she reaches out to touch him, he's no, thank you, and backs away.
Yeah. But I also like when 3PO is telling his lines of he's looking at all his friends, and the only one that speaks is Dio, and he goes, sad.
Yeah.
Or when Rey is gone and he talks to Poe and he goes, I miss her.
Yeah.
But so after that, they get the rally and they get all the data on Exegol. And I love this line. It's not over the top, but it's really good. Their speech that they give, because they say that the First Order wins by making you think you're not alone. Good people will fight. You are
alone.
Yeah, making you think you are alone. And he goes on, good people will fight if we lead them.
Yeah.
Leia never gave up, neither will we. We're going to show them we're not afraid. And this is my favorite line. What our mothers and fathers fought for, we will not let die. That is the moment. That is like one of my favorite lines of this movie. What our mothers and fathers, because it also brings back the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, what everyone's been fighting for this whole time. What they fought for, we will not let die. We will not let them down. The battle, the fight has been passed to us, and it's our job to ensure that it continues, and we will not let it die. And then I like the Finn. They've taken enough of us. Now we take the war to them. And the music is stirring to hype for this battle, and you see them preparing all the ships, and I just love that scene.
I
So-
really like Leia's saber.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
It's
very
like
so
really,
awesome.
really, it's really elegant.
It is. Yep.
That princess side of her.
Yeah, that's
It's- yeah,
Alderaan
very
all the
royal.
way.
Yeah, I thought they did a
And-
really good job with that.
That was an interesting point too, because what Luke says is that Leia basically chose not to be a Jedi because she sensed her son's death at the end of her Jedi path.
Mm-hmm.
And she said that someone would pick up her saber again and finish the journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like how perfect that is. And that, I felt like that line there, if we were paying attention, you'd have known that Ben was gonna die. I felt like even the first time you see it, if you kind of just like if you were paying attention to the footwork in The Last Jedi, if you pay attention to that line, it meant that Ben was going to die at the end of this movie. It's a little foreshadowing.
You know what I
And
find interesting is in that flashback or that vision of Leia and Luke training together.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was one interesting that she has a blue lightsaber, a color of a Jedi Guardian, and then when they're training and fighting together, she actually has Luke on the ground. She's beaten him in a lightsaber battle.
Mm-hmm.
So, he might be a little more strong in the Force side of things, but as far as combat, Leia's always been tough, strong, a fighter, and even able to beat him in lightsaber combat.
Mm-hmm. And strategy as well. Like I think that plays a huge factor in lightsaber duels is knowing strategy, and knowing your enemy. And I think that was another, like, I think so too. Like that flashback was huge because once again, now we know that Leia was training Rey. So once again, it gives more credence to how far Rey was able to come in that short time.
so I do like this. This movie is so good in that aspect. It really, yeah, you see Leia and you get to see her and her, and I know Billy Lord was the one who portrayed her in that scene, and that's always special to be able to portray her. And so I kind of need to, because I know you need to get going here, so we kind of need to talk more. Let's talk some more towards the end when we get to Rey gets Luke's X-Wing, and I love it. We're getting an old signal from Red 5.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
And I thought it's interesting because what Palpatine is trying to do here is he really wants Rey, and I think this whole him trying to get her to strike him down was more of misleading. What he's trying to do is get her to lose her focus and become uncontrolled, because basically, if you kind of want to go back to the Bane books that we've talked about, and he's trying to, his clone body isn't enough, can't handle his power. That's why he's all even grosser than the Emperor. And so his clone body can't handle his own power. And so I think he's trying to literally transfer his being into Rey's body. Or I think he was probably going to do the same thing even if Kylo had killed her. And he would try to do the same thing to him.
Yeah.
But that's what I find interesting is he then finds out that they're a dyad in the Force. I love that line, unseen for generations.
Unseen for generations.
Because if you know, spoilers, if you know anything about Knights of the Republic, that's pretty much where the dyad idea came from.
Bond in the Force.
And so, but he says the dyad, what was it, the line here? I wrote it down. Before we get to that, I like how Palpatine is up to his old tricks. He's trying to convince Rey that she needs to kill him in order to save her friends. Basically, how he got Anakin It's how he tried to get Luke. He's just like using the same tactics. He thinks that him and his power, he became arrogant and lost in his ways, the same way the Jedi did in the prequels. I think it's kind of the as he would say, ironic. But okay, it's the dyad. The power of two restores the one true emperor. And so he's basically taking out his life force, and you can see that his body becomes healed. And that was interesting. And I love, so I once fall, so falls the last Skywalker, and he throws Ben down the pit of however far that goes.
The random pit that just happens to be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
He's
he could
probably
have
been
opened it up himself. He was strong on the Force again at that point.
I love the Force lightning, the Force storm, because it reminds me of Vader's line is the power to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force. And this is one of the largest examples of the Force being used in all of Star Wars is this giant Force storm. And it doesn't even look like it's taxing him at all.
But then when he tries to use it against Rey, it pales in comparison.
Well, if you can see her, she isn't just blocking it, she's sending it back, kind of like Yoda would. And you can see the explosions that are hitting him. And I really like kind of how his face melts.
To stop doing it when it's hurting himself.
Well, I don't think he had a choice. Obviously, we saw Rey could do it. We saw Rey could use the Force lightning, so obviously then she could probably stop it, no different than Yoda. And I think she was doing like Yoda had done and is amplifying it back towards him. And he doesn't have a lightsaber to stop it. And I think I thought it was interesting the way his face kind of melts. It brought me back to Indiana Jones, and I felt like, especially because I've been watching Light and Magic and how much effort it took to make them do that, it kind of felt like that moment, and I thought that was like their own, it was almost like Light and Magic, ILM's own little Easter egg to some of their previous work. And I thought that was kind of cool. But I get the sense, like, when she's killing him, she's not just killing his body. And that's when she finally does it, because all the Sith Eternal and everything is destroyed, and you can see it just feels like he's not coming back. He's dead. She killed him and any essence of him. And I think that was cool.
I love the sound design when he starts to do the Force storm.
Yes.
It goes quiet, like builds up vibrations, and then just goes quiet for a second as it launches out of his fingers. And I think I like that power because it is reminiscent of Knights of the Republic again. You get those kind of influences there, where Force storm is the evolution above Force lightning, and it looks so good.
Yeah, and like I had said before, I think that's coming up to the end of this movie. I love seeing Force powers. I love that like the cartoons can like exaggerate some of the Force powers just because it's easier, to do that in a cartoon versus live action. But I feel like they did a great job. Like you said, this was the biggest display of like some sort of Force power. And I thought that in itself was really cool. I think some of the ways that this ended up playing out was a little strange. I would do differently. But yeah, I think this, once again, you need to just follow with what's written, what was directed in some ways, have a little faith in what they they wanted to portray in this versus, thinking so
Mm-hmm.
much of why can, you know, how could somebody force heal somebody, but then they can't force heal them back, situations, like all that. If you both have the power to force heal, but you can't force heal each other,
I think I could
only
make an
one
argument on
can.
that.
Well, yeah, anyone can argue it. I mean, I can argue anything. Throw anything at me, I'll argue it.
Fair.
It doesn't matter if you can argue it or not. I'm just saying, that is a huge question. To be like, oh yeah, you can force heal at this time, but not this time, and you can't wait a certain amount of time, or even now what we're learning about like Palpatine and everything that Palpatine was able to do. So then there's the power to do that as well. So it's kind of like, where you draw the line on what powers that you use, type situation. Because,
I just think
even if you think of like someone dying, and bringing them back, type of situation. But yeah.
I think in that moment she was dead, and Ray can feel, or Finn can feel her, and because you said that like the Lego movie was confirming that Finn has the Force.
Yeah.
He in this movie Finn feels when Ray dies, and I think both of them were drained of their life force in that fight when Palpatine did that, and I think Ben then used all his energy to climb out of that pit and gives his last remaining life force to Rey. And I think that moment is kind of it's really nice because Rey, I think, knows that Ben is gonna die, and that's why she gives him the kiss, because it gives him the last moment of what turned him back to the light side, what he wanted, and it was the love of her and his mother, of Leia. And it's kind of that touching moment because, and the reason why I say Leia is because you see him disappear no different. He becomes one with the Force. But you also, Leia's body hasn't disappeared yet. And that's the moment when he dies, she becomes one with the Force as well. And so that's just a good moment, and it's touching that he would use his last little ability because of the people who saved him for Rey. And that I just like that moment, and I would be interested to see how they can kind of continue. I like also, like, as soon as they're leaving Exegol, the sun's coming up. It's getting brighter on Exegol. And I feel like once the evil has been extinguished, that even the planet itself is already starting to heal. That planet hasn't probably seen daylight in a long time. And it was interesting because they haven't even left Exegol yet, but you start to see the sun and everything starting to look better. And it's just interesting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I love when the three of them get back. You have that little celebration. They all hug. I don't think it was needed, but I would have loved to see her explain to them that basically they couldn't have done this without Ben.
Yeah.
The person that they hated, that the love that she had to show and the Leia showed to him helped turn him back, and without his help would not have been able to finish that, and how much of a part he played in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've kind of rambled on here. You guys can jump in if.
No, I think like what you're saying, I like that too. I like the celebration. Obviously brings ties to the other sequel. with the celebration, celebrations across the galaxy. Rebellica said the whole galaxy may be starting to heal, and I think they showed that well. Like, and once again, bringing back Warwick Davis and his real son, getting to see them on
Hmm.
Endor. We got Wicket
That's
and his little
fantastic.
son. That was such a cool moment in the movie too, and yeah, I think like what Rebellica said. I think once again now we're getting back to the healing, and once again, we have a new generation of heroes to basically carry the baton, and hopefully, there's not another order that comes from this order.
One
So,
one question I'm kind of left with is who's flying the Ghost at this point?
yeah, right.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's my question. What's it been up
uh,
to?
Hmm.
so, okay, let's talk about the last scene. Ray
Where
goes
they
to the.
bury Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber in the sand.
Oh.
I so I get the irony there, but I'm also, I don't know. It's kind of like it feels like passing the baton. It's time for that generation, and for it's time for the new generation to make the new stories and the new galaxy.
Hmm.
And we kind of talked about this. The more that I say it, the more that I hear it, the more that I like it. Ray Skywalker. She,
I'm just
I
sad
like,
that I'm just sad that beautiful lightsaber is buried in the sand.
I
Leia's
know.
lightsaber,
I like.
so beautiful.
So, the reason why I like the Ray Skywalker is it also makes the whole. It's called the Skywalker saga, and it's always been about the Skywalkers. All 9 movies are, and it kind of, her choosing the Skywalker name, even though she's a Palpatine, it more means that names aren't necessarily all there is. It's who you are. It's who you choose to be. It's who, yeah, it's who you choose to be. Who's you choose is your family. We all have
Hmm.
friends that aren't related to us that we call family. That's,
Hmm.
and that's what Star Wars is. Luke, Leia, and Han didn't, well, Luke and Leia didn't know that they were related till the very end, but they were family. Even Lando is included in that. And that's what Star Wars is being a group. Han and Chewie aren't family, but they are family. And I know I'm starting to sound like a Fast and Furious movie, but it's the
It's all
point
you
is
need
that
is family.
that it makes it that the name you choose is who you are, not necessarily what you're given with or born with. And she's choosing to ignore what her birth name would be, and choosing her family is the Skywalker family. And Rey,
Hmm.
not only that, but being a Jedi, the name Jedi or the name Skywalker is synonymous with the Jedi, and so it's fitting. And uh, I think you wanted to kind of get going a little earlier. Do you guys have anything else we want to add? We're gonna have to end a little early here, so
Yeah, I'll just say about that whole thing. I think for a long time I've thought that was really cheesy, and like we've already discussed, you can argue about anything either way, and it is what it is. There's obviously no way anyone can change it. It is what happened. I would say I do like the flip side of that argument. The flip side in being that somebody can be more than what their name is. Someone can supersede the past. You don't have to pay for the sins of the father, or in this case, the grandfather. And I feel like it would be just as powerful to say that she's a Palpatine, but she's taking the Palpatine name in a different way. she's showing that just because her name is Palpatine, she doesn't have to be evil. I
Mm.
think that's, there's a similar argument to that. It's just like, somebody in real life, if your dad is a horrible person, do you have to change your last name because your dad was bad? Or can you be a good person and change the history of what that name means?
I
So
feel like
I think there's a little bit of both there.
the argument to that is if your dad's a bad guy, a few people don't like him. Whereas the Emperor was a really bad guy, and the entire galaxy didn't like him.
If you're the
It's a much bigger name to try to change people's
Except,
mind
if you're the
yeah,
against.
but
granddaughter
now
of
she's the
Hitler, are you going to
great.
keep
Now
that
she's
name?
the greatest, though. So we have now the worst person and the greatest person. So now you have
Yeah,
a
but
battle of the
Mm.
greatest person in the galaxy who defeated the worst person in the galaxy. So just as powerful as the wickedness is the greatness.
I don't know if I'm the granddaughter of Hitler. I think probably changing my name.
Well, there still is people with the last name Hitler.
Yeah,
And I'm not going to dislike them based on their last name. I'm not going to judge them based on their last name. And if they did great
fair.
things, I think that'd be even more, heartwarming if I heard that, a great granddaughter of Hitler, was doing all these amazing things across the UK. I think that'd be awesome. I think that'd be cool.
So one thing we kind of discussed this, and I just wanted to touch on it briefly before we end. But we talked about, do we want to see these characters again in more stuff? And my thought on that is, I do, but I want to see Rey training a new generation of Jedi. We could make a little series of that, but I don't really want to see a new trilogy in regards to the fact of like another Sith comes out. I want there to be like 1,000 years or so before we start seeing Sith again, and we'll look at the legends that Rey was, and Grogu will be a grandmaster or whatever. But I want there to like actually be a time of peace and like make it seem like this effort work, not like in 5 years, well, there's another great big evil we have to destroy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there should be remnants of the Sith in the unknown regions that take generations to rebuild.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to see these characters continue. The other thing to think about, and we haven't touched on it, but we were talking about lightsabers, is Rey creates her own new one. And
Mhm.
I love it.
just as Leia's is so Leia, I think that Rey's lightsaber is totally her. I love the way that she switches it on with like the spin flip, and oh man, that's an awesome lightsaber too.
I do like that lightsaber because obviously it was basically her staff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm watching this movie thinking, she's got the lightsaber on her belt. Why does she carry this staff everywhere?
It's a good walking stick, sir.
Just so that's, but I love that like she stubbornly does that, and so that's what she makes her lightsaber out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and Rebecca said I'd rather see shorts or a mini series, not new movies. And I think, Disney can do obviously whatever they want. They have the money to do it and they don't really care. If they did another trilogy, I would be all over it. Night one, every single one of them.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And
There's
we'll be we'll be
no
discussing
Star
it
Wars we
later.
won't see night
Yeah.
one.
But I do feel like they've been doing so well with the shows and the series and things like that, even if it's a one season, series of whatever it might be. And if they did that, I would love it as well, because you're going to get, more actual screen time with a series, even if it's one season,
Mm-hmm.
than probably, 3 movies, so I think that that's cool. You could build it. We get to see it week after week versus waiting years in between. And then hopefully, nothing happens to mess up the filming and the directing and all this type of stuff. Most likely it's like with the show, you're going to keep the same director. It's going to be more fluid.
I
But
think
yeah, I would love to see any one of these characters really just to continue on with their story. I feel like they left a lot of openings at the end of this movie that we could follow Lando, we could follow Finn, Poe, or Ray. Really, so I think any of it would be good.
I would really love to see a new uh, Star Wars Jedi Academy where Ray is like the Luke figure in that game, and Finn could be the Kyle Katarn, could be your master, and you could go on missions and help people across the galaxy as a Padawan learning to be a Jedi. And that arc, that game is really good, and I feel like it could flow well with what they've established after this too.
And that's kind of my
Hmm.
point, was that not that I would love to see a new trilogy. I would just, what I was trying to say is that if we start to see a new trilogy, that there some time had a long time would have passed. Like this great battle has led to a lasting, somewhat lasting, peaceful time, and that the next threat would be for way off in the future. But that's what I was saying. Like series, you could get little series with like little events, like Quentin was talking about, little missions, uh, Jedi Academy style. That would be a great series. I would love to see that.
Hmm. Yeah, and Send It O'Reilly said, "Don't tell Disney I said this, but I'd pay double the subscription if they did nothing but more Star Wars series." But I'm pretty sure Kathleen Kennedy already said there won't be any more trilogies for the foreseeable future. And yeah, there's been multiple people that talked about that they're backing away from the movies, especially um,
I don't know if
trilogies.
it's movies. I think they said trilogies. Yeah,
Yeah, but I think even movies as well, because if you look at what they're working on coming up, they don't got no time, and they don't have the
they
amount
don't
of
got no
people to
time.
do that. Don't you dare like start trying to make a movie during like the Ahsoka series and stuff like that. Don't even think about it. You put everything, every person on that series.
Have you seen?
I don't want you splitting people up and figuring out who's going to work on what. Like you need to be working on these series.
You muted yourself, Q.
Dave is working on the Ahsoka series, and that's all you need to know. Like
He's already. I've
that
already
man
seen.
will nail it. That's his character. He is everything Star Wars is. I have no doubt in my mind that the only thing I need to know is Dave's working on that project, and
Yeah. And
anyone else can go do whatever they do on Star Wars.
And John, I want Dave and John and everybody. If you're going to make a movie, I want them on the movie. If you're going to make a
Yeah,
series, I want them on the series. I want them even
True.
if they're not directing it, I want them on set overseeing things. So that's what I'm saying is I need my people on the shows, so don't make no
Name my
movies. Yeah.
So okay, so I think that's a good ending point for us. Uh, thank you guys so much for joining. Looks like we got Purple Haze there, Rebellica, Send It, Natogo Bap stop by, Seth was in the chat. Let's see, I know there was someone else I'm missing here. Oh, Blind Giant 808. Do you know them, Josiah?
Yeah, yeah, Blind Giant. He's my guy over in Hawaii. And yeah, big shout out to Purple Haze. I appreciate that you're doing your homework too. I'm gonna be guesting on her podcast this week. Spoiler alert. So yeah, I appreciate you stopping by.
Oh, cool. Well, there's your shout out. uh, guys, if you want to support us, join our Discord. We have fun chats there. Also, we have our Patreon listed if you want to support us in that way. All of our Twitters are either on the screen, and the links are in the description as well. And I also wanted to say that for what we're going to be talking about the next 3 weeks, we're going to be going over Bad Batch Season 1. We're going to cut it into 3 parts, and we're going to talk about that over the next 3 weeks. Then we'll talk about Rogue One the Monday well, the week before the Andor series comes out. And then we'll basically be covering that because we also know that Disney's schedule, there could be some crossover with Andor episodes coming out same week as some Bad Batch season 2 as well.
Mhm.
So lots of Star Wars stuff to look forward to, lots of stuff to talk about. And yeah, it was a fun one. You know, one thing I wanted to bring out that I thought is when Rey hears the voices,
Mm-hmm.
Luke is the last one to talk. And what does he say, Quinton?
May the force be with you always.
Well, kind of. He says the force will be with. He says the force will be with you always.
Yeah, close enough. It means the same thing, right?
Uh-huh.
All right. See you guys.
Have a good one.